Hi there, and welcome to 100 Days of Discipleship. I know you've been blessed thus far. Listen, we're continuing our discourse on hermeneutics, the science of Bible interpretation, and I'm sure this is going to bless you. What I have today is very simple and powerful, life changing tool to understanding the Bible. But before I go on, before I cut to the chase, I want to say that you should subscribe if you haven't already. And do me a favor, share this link with one or two or three people. If you know that it's going to be a blessing to them. And like I jokingly, seriously say, this is your good opportunity to revenge all those WhatsApp groups that send you message unsolicited. This is your revenge. Wire them what? They must hear what? Amen, somebody. All right. Okay. So I want to talk about something, and I want to start by telling you something very interesting that just highlights and crystallizes how much better the coming generation is in terms of learning and access to information. So, my youngest daughter, she was writing, and someone was dictating to her, and she was supposed to spell lunch, Launch. Did I spell it right? Okay. And she was supposed to spell that, and she was writing lunch like the meal, at the middle of the day. And so when we corrected her, she was not like, "Oh, how come they sound alike and it's a different spelling?" And before I could even say anything, um, in fact, okay, sorry, I wasn't there. One of our pastors was there. Before she could even say anything, Edima comes on the scene and says, "Yeah, they are homonyms. You know, words that have different spelling but sound alike." It was just very interesting. That homonyms. Now I'm thinking, what age was I when I knew what a homonym was? This generation probably is different. You think Gen Z is a problem? Wait for the one after them. It's interesting. And does this have to do with Bible interpretation? You have to understand that when it comes to definition must be discerned in context. Let me give you an example. ROSE. What is the meaning of ROSE? Guess what? You don't know. It depends on the context. The word rose could either refer to the flower or the action. If I say rose, I might be referring to the flower, or I might mean he stood up. So it is the context that will tell you what definition applies. All right. And this is a very important principle when it comes to hermeneutics, the science of Bible interpretation. You have to understand that you don't just read a verse and try to interpret, even worse. Some people try to get their definitions from Oxford. Oxford, guess what? There's something called the lexicon, the Greek dictionary, that tells you the actual Greek word that was transliterated, and what that word actually means in the original context. Because in translation, a lot can be lost. So you have to understand that the Bible was not originally written in English. So the Old Testament is written in Aramaic and Hebrew, and the New Testament in Greek. And so when you are studying the Greek root words, you are not trying to be deep. There's almost no way to truly understand what texts mean without understanding the real meaning of the word. And I'm just going to give you a simple exercise that will help you see how important this is. There's a popular text that people try to use, when they're talking about God blessing you financially. Do I believe God blesses financially? Yes, unequivocally. However, does this text talk about that? In fact, it might be saying the exact opposite of what people think it says. And the text is 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8 says, "And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always having all sufficiency in all things may abound to every good work." This is a good place where the black pianist will go, "Wow," and the preacher says, "And God," come on, I said, "God is able." I said is able to make all the grace. And you know, when I say all grace, I mean that when you look at your garage, you have the Ferraris and the Rolls Royce, and when you don't feel like them, you have the Range Rover, because it won't be above your price range. You know. Oh my God. I'm just joking. But guess what? That's not what it means. So at face value, you think it means God is going to give you so much abundance that you have more than enough all the time. And so when it is time to do a good work of generosity, it's not going to be a struggle. Whilst there is nothing wrong in believing that God is going to do that, that's not what this text is saying. In fact, like I said, it's saying the opposite. So now there are three operative words here: the word grace, the word sufficiency, and the word abound. And let's see in context what those words refer to. So first and foremost, you have to understand that the epistles are letters. If I write you a 7-page letter and you go to the middle and you want to start reading from the middle, you're going to miss the context. You're not going to understand what I'm saying. And a lot of people read their Bibles that way. As much as possible, try to follow the flow of thought so that nothing will be lost. And so when you're following the flow of thought, let's go to chapter 8 from verse 1. Follow closely. So what does grace mean in the context of chapter 9? You have to read chapter 8 to know. And it says from verse 1, more of our brethren, we do you to wit. Okay, let me use KJV because wit costs money. Anyway, more of our brethren, we make known to you the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia. Now, what grace is he talking about? He says that in great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded to the riches of their liberality. So what he's saying is different from what you think 2 Corinthians 9:8 means. In 2 Corinthians 9:8, you think that you're going to abound in generosity because you always have more than enough, all sufficiency in all things. But now the grace that was bestowed on Macedonia is that in spite of not having enough, they were still willing to stretch sacrificially to give. And I'll just go ahead and tell you that it doesn't quite take grace, the grace of God, to give when you have. It takes grace to stretch when you don't have. That's when people can see and say, come on, there must be something to your generosity. Because a lot of people who have a lot, especially, for the hype and for praise, they're going to give. I've taught you this before. Selfish people give, contrary to popular opinion. The Bible says, 1 Corinthians 13, it says, if I bestow all my goods to the poor and have not love, it profits me nothing. So that means generosity is not always a proof of love. Sometimes I'm giving generously because I want you to praise me. Our international audience, how do I explain that to you? So, well, it's just a local hype, that goes on in our country. So it literally means, aren't you going to spend that money? You do understand? Spend it, And so when people are hyping you like that, you just want to give, not out of generosity, but out of, But the grace that was on the church at Macedonia was that in spite of their poverty, they were sacrificial. So what if you found yourself in a situation where even if you don't have everything, you can still see people who need more than you do, and at some intervals you can reach out and help? I believe that therein lies, the Christian virtue, the widow's mite. Because a lot of people are waiting until they have to give, and that's not how to grow in the Christian virtue of generosity. All right? So that's number one. That's what grace is. It's already contrary to the surface level interpretation of 2 Corinthians 9:8. And now let's look at the word sufficiency. Go to 2 Corinthians 9:8. When it says, and God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that you always having all sufficiency. The Greek word is autokia. Autarkeia. Autokia. And that word was used in only 2 places in the New Testament. The other place it was used, guess, 1 Timothy 6:6. You know what 1 Timothy 6:6 says? It says, and godliness with contentment. You know the Greek word for contentment? Autokia. So when it says all sufficiency, let me finish quoting 1 Timothy 6:6 for those who don't know it. Godliness with contentment is great gain. All right. So when Paul says all sufficiency, he actually means all contentment. So God is able to make the grace such as what was in Macedonia, where despite their deep poverty they could give. God is able to make that grace abound towards you. How is he going to do that? So that with all contentment, it is only when you are content, you know that you are not where you want to be, but you are not where you used to be, and so you are enjoying the process, and you are thankful for the process, thankful for where you are and what you have. So it is that contentment that will make you to be able to abound in good work at every point. Listen, if you will always be generous, you must always be content. Because you will not always have as much as you think you should. So if that grace to be able to abound in every good work, the only way that's going to happen is you're going to be content. And this is just an example of how not defining words in their context can give you the opposite of what the words are actually saying. The direct opposite. You have the direct opposite interpretation. And this is one of the many instances that show you that indeed, to understand the Bible, you need a trainer. You need to be taught. I hope this helps. If I have the time, I'm going to look for another example and just crystallize this further. I'm sure this blessed you. Share this with someone. So anyway, before I move on from this, let me just say this. So at the end of the day, in as much as you expect God to bless you, bring yourself to such a maturity in the Lord where you're content. And that's the will of God. That's the will of God. You can trust for more and still be content. All right. Still be content. You know that you're covetous when you're always saying, if only I had this car, I'll be happy. Nothing material should be the determinant of your happiness. Be content. Trust in the Lord. And it is then that you can abound in every good work. All right? And so Paul's admonition to you, let's go back to 2 Corinthians 8, from verse 6. He says, so we urge Titus that as he has begun, so he would also complete this grace in you as well. But as you abound in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in all diligence, and in your love to us, see that you abound in this grace also. So this kind of grace is part of the parameters of spiritual growth. That I want to come to a point where even when it is not convenient, if I feel led and if the occasion is justified, I can go out of my way to be a blessing to someone else or to the Church of Jesus Christ. I hope this helped you. Don't forget to like this video so the YouTube algorithm will show more people. And if you're blessed, state it in the comments. All right. And I'll see you next time. Blessings.